Hey, Mega Moms, Jessica Hensley here with Real Estate Mega Moms, where we help moms create a life and a business that they love. And today I am joined by Alex, and I meant to ask you to help me pronounce your last name. Go ahead
I
and say
avoid it as much as I possibly can. It's my dad's fault. It's Aanderud.
Aanderud.
Yep.
Aanderud. Okay, Alex Aanderud with My Disc Guy. Is that right?
You don't know DISC. It's Human Spectrums Consulting, as you don't know DISC.
You don't know DISC. So if you've never heard of DISC, this is a personality assessment or a strengths assessment program that, man, when was that created? Probably, was it in the 80s or?
1920s. It was actually in the
Oh,
early 1920s. There was a division in the psychological community, and a whole bunch of people started studying abnormal psychology. What made people weird and how do we fix them? And there was a small group, Dr. Marston was one of them, wanted to study normal people, and he looked at four categories: dominance, influence, stability, and conscientiousness or compliance. And so he looked at those four categories, and about 10, 15 years later, they started creating assessments based on his work. And then those are now become behavioral style assessments that we use today.
and in the real estate world, I think Gary Keller really brought it to like prominence because he also they call KPIs, I think is what they call them, but it's disc background, right? And so he really when I was with Keller Williams, they talked a lot about knowing personality styles to know who should fit on your team, how to deal with clients. So there's a lot of ways we can use this tool. So I'm assuming that's kind of your life's work, right? To help people understand themselves or what?
Yeah, I would say it is. I would say actually right now my life's work is undoing what everyone's done with the disc. Like it's
Okay.
so funny because like I'm the disc guy and I hate the disc assessment. I love it from a concept perspective, but the challenge is like I've gone to these different events and I've listened to some of these top trainers. It's like, if you're going to be successful in real estate, you need to up your D. You need to be a high D and a high I, and you're going to be successful. I'm like, anybody can be successful. Like there isn't a specific profile that's guaranteed to have success. You have to look at the individual, the environment, and the role, and you adjust things, and all of a sudden the person can thrive. And so when I first started, I've got a background. I was an engineer for Boeing. And then I did therapy work, suicide, depression, anxiety, PTSD. I worked with like medical doctors who were suicidally depressed. Because I wasn't a medical professional, I didn't have to report them. I worked with kids. I worked with veterans. I was one of 100 mental health providers for the Vegas shooting victims. And I worked with this woman and her son, and I helped her son overcome some emotional challenges that he had. And she said, "Can you come help my 30 other kids?" I'm like, "You have 30 other kids?" She says, "Yeah, I own a real estate team." So that's how I got introduced into real estate. And what happened was, like, for me, as a kid, I was physically and sexually abused. I had a lot of trauma. I gained 60 pounds in 3 months because of medicines I was on to counteract rage. And I was having seizures. So I got to go to school with wires glued to my head. And it's like, it was just a horrible experience. But at the same point, I learned how to read people. And I've always been able to read people. I've been a chameleon my whole life. And then all of a sudden, somebody went down to an Eric Thomas event and brought me back these profiles. And all of a sudden, I could put numbers to people. And the challenge was, as I was talking, like the way You Don't Know Disc came to be was I was talking with someone and they were like the top disc trainer. And I'm having this conversation with these people. And I'm like, okay, so let me get this straight. Your disc is fixed. And they're like, yes. I'm like, so it doesn't change? Like, yes. But disc measures behavior. They're like, yeah. I'm like, the behavior changes. They're like, yes. I'm like, so how is something that measures a movable object not move? And it just like fried their brain. I'm like, this has been around since the 20s. How am I the first person asking this question? You're also not one category. People talk about the disc and they talk about being a D. I'm a high D, I'm a driver. I'm like, no, you are D, I, S, and C. You're all four letters. And high scores aren't good. Highs and lows, they're just distance away from 50. They're all observable. And so when I talk about disc, the reason why I love disc and I hate disc is used in the industry, especially in the real estate industry, to classify people and put them in boxes. It's excuses why you're successful or you're not. And that's not how disc should be used. Disc is a spectrum of human performance. And if you understand the spectrum, you know where you are, you know how to adapt for yourself, and you know how to show up for your clients. You're able to better communicate, you're able to better lead, and you can help people be successful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And, one of the first times we spoke, I was sharing with you that I love cloverleaf and you helped engineer that or help them put it together. You were involved in some way, right?
So Clover
So,
is an amazing program. They've got a whole bunch of different assessments. And when they first started, they did a lot of work. And I said, you should, like, I'm a coach and this is how I'm using it. So they started asking me a bunch of questions. And so we developed like their coaching program using Cloverleaf. And it's an incredible suite, but it's all really about understanding who you are. Like
mhm.
it's finding out more about you.
Yeah, my team. So the reason I'm bringing that up is my team, they love it too. And I mean, everyone really looks forward to seeing these coaching notes. And sometimes when it's like really spot on, like they'll send a screenshot and be like, "This is so you, Jessica." Like, I needed to hear this about you, or sorry guys, this is me, or whatever. But I have the healthiest team that I've ever had. And I know that, I've done a lot of work as a leader as well, but a couple things you said earlier really resonated with me. One about the boxes and about having an excuse for being successful or not successful. So I have taken DISC since I was 15. That's the first time I took it. And I scored a DI, high DI. And I've taken it multiple times since, and I always score the same. I don't know if it's because I know I'm answering the questions in a way that I feel like that's what's going to yield the result. And maybe that's the case. I don't know, who knows? But I always score the same. Yeah. But my point is, I'm like, oh, I'm a leader. This is kind of what I've told myself I am, and I am one. And that's good. I'm glad I am. And when I look at hiring team members, I look for S and C's, and that is actually who I have right now. But I have one person in particular that since she started with me has blossomed and grown. She's my ISA and marketing. And so she's actually started her own company now. She's a CEO of her own company.
Nice.
And she's an IS, so now it's just so cool to see. So anyway.
I love that. The thing is like, as a leader, one of the challenges. So I was working with somebody earlier today and I had a conversation because we went through and they're hiring an assistant. And so when I do hiring, I don't just look, does the person do the role? I look at who's going to be leading them, what's the culture of the team, what's the work you're going to be having them do, who are they going to be working with? They have to take all these factors into account. So we hire the perfect fit. But the challenge is they're in stark contrast to the leader. And here's why. Because the leader is wanting to hire someone to do what they don't want to do. So you got to hire someone who's not like you to go do it, because otherwise they won't want to do it. So I'm talking with the leader. She's like, yeah, she's driving me nuts. She's asking questions. She's doing stuff. I go, right. Because in order for her to thrive, you need to give her these things so that she can go do what you don't want to do. And that slight adjustment, understanding the communication, breaking it down, seeing where those differences are and adapting your communication, it's all about, so when I work with people, it's about adaptive leadership. It's about learning your people, adapting so that you can help them thrive, so that as a team, you guys can thrive.
Yes, I like to tell the people that take the disc, like, this is maybe a great understanding of who you are and why you behave the way you do, but it's not an excuse to stay that way. And it's a reason to, oh, okay, I acknowledge that I'm really short. This is me. And I don't want to have long conversations. So maybe I should work on that, right? Maybe I should try to have more conversations with some people that really need that, right?
Right. And it's there's two different aspects. It's learning what are your strengths and your weaknesses, but you don't necessarily need to work on your weaknesses. You need to make your success not dependent upon your weakness. So you can either develop that adaptability, which is important, but also structure it so that you don't have to rely on your weaknesses for success. And so if anyone's interested and they want to go take it, if you go to youdon'tknowdisc.com, you can actually take the DISC assessment for free. You get a 25-page report, all included. It's right there on the website. Just put your name, email, fill out the form. I think there's 3 different sections. And once you get it, you'll get a whole bunch of information back. Huge insight for you.
Alex, I need to put that link in my book. Is that okay? Because
Yeah,
I
totally.
talk about in one of the chapters in the book I'm writing, which is Micro Team Mega Success, how to build a real estate team without hiring a buyer's agent or without hiring another agent. So anyway, one of the chapters is about the DISC assessment. So I will put that in there so they can take that assessment.
So
So
my
here's a team.
assessments
Go
more
ahead.
of it's a personality blueprint. So the assessment that I use, everyone calls it DISC, and I call it the DISC for the ease of it, but it's actually three different psychologies. So if you go and you take the assessment, you get DISC, which measures behavioral tendencies, but you also get the values, which is based on the work of Allport and Spronger and looks at intrinsic motivators, what drives people to do what they do. And then there's the attribute index, which is based on the work of formal axiology of Dr. Hartman, which looks at how people process and filter information and how they prioritize and value that information. And so those three things give you a good round. With those three assessments, I can actually predict somebody's Enneagram, their strength finders. Like I can go through and calculate all of these different, because all the assessments are based around the same kind of thing. But with these three, it gives me enough information that I can basically map out to all the other assessments, which is kind of cool.
And it's so crazy how accurate it is. I know a lot of people feel like, oh, this test doesn't know, anything about me. And then they read it and they're like, this is how I was. Wow, that's exactly, that's spot on. So Alex, let's talk about you and me. So can you tell me, what are you? Like, tell me a little bit about your personality.
I am a high D, high I, low C, high economic, high political. So what all that means, I love to move fast. I love to have fun. I laugh, I joke. Everything for me is about growth. It's interesting though, because my intrinsic motivators, if you look at like my test results, I'm a high economic, what's in it for me, high political, what's in it for my people. But that's not really my motivators. My motivator is a high altruistic. I want to help the world. And what happened is when I left Boeing, I started helping people, but I was going broke. And it got to the point that I was helping people who were suicidally depressed, getting phone calls at midnight, like literally, I have a gun, please help me. Like I was taking real calls that I probably shouldn't be taking because I'm not a medical professional, but I helped. But like those kinds of situations, but I was going broke. And so what I did was I shifted into the business model, and 10% of every dollar that comes in goes to scholarships. And I work with leaders to help them change lives. So what I've done is I still have this drive and mission for global impact, eradicating mental and emotional trauma. I want people to believe that they're enough, to have hope in what they can do and be able to go out and do it. Like for me, that moment people go from it's not possible to what if, biggest like, oh my God, that is my gold. That's what I love. And right now, I can't do it. I can't reach enough people. So what I'm doing is that I'm inspiring the leaders to go do that. And I'm donating scholarships for people who can't afford to go get a coach, to go get alternative therapy because insurance doesn't cover it. And so now I'm building a business to create a nonprofit that can go change the world. So that's kind of how my values have evolved. And like I said, things change over time. And that's why mine's evolved the way that it has.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so needed right now in this world. I feel like we have a mental health crisis
It
going on.
is. It is a huge issue, mental and emotional health. And the problem is that we've stigmatized it to a point that it's a problem or it's a challenge. It's like we go to the gym, we exercise, we take care of our health, and people are even starting to challenge, okay, well, what's wrong with being overweight? There's nothing wrong with being overweight, except it's not good for your health, like physically. And it's like we're fat shaming. I'm like, no, I'm encouraging you to prioritize your health so that you can live longer. But then we start looking at the mental and emotional, and it's like, oh, you have to go get help. You have to go get counseling. It's like, I hire a trainer at the gym and everyone says, good job. I hire a therapist and they go, what the hell's wrong with you? And I'm like, I don't understand that model. That needs to change.
Yeah. What are you seeing right now in the real estate? Because I assume, and maybe I'm wrong, you work with a lot of realtors, do you? Yeah.
Yeah, I work with a
So,
lot.
so what are you seeing with the market and just the stresses that real estate agents face? What are some ways that they can cope with it kind of through this medium of the disc and all of that?
Okay. So one of the things that I'm seeing most common in the market right now is fear and apathy. There's fear of, oh my God, this is taking too much. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know. I'm not good enough. I can't make it. There's a lot of self-judgment that's coming out, but there's also an apathy of like, it doesn't matter how much I work. I just can't make it. Like there's just a giving up. I mean, we've had over 60,000 agents walk away in the first half of the year. Like they just hung up their license and said, I'm done. And it's not because they can't, but it's because their leaders weren't there showing them that they can. I worked with this one agent and she was a low I personality. wasn't very talkative, didn't like talking to people. She was a high economic, what's in it for me, low political, low altruistic. So she didn't like helping people and didn't really like helping her people. She just wanted to know what was in it for her. And she didn't like talking to people. And she's a real estate agent and everybody laughs. And so what I did was I said, that's okay. Let's teach you to ask questions. This is what I talked about. You don't have to get better at your weakness. Make your success not dependent upon it. She got really good at asking questions. And so instead of her talking, the client was talking. I also had her say, the number one thing I care about is the referral. So I'm going to provide better service to you than all of the other agents who are going to lie to you and tell you it's about you, because at least I'm being honest and telling you what my intent is. Now, that's not what every other agent, but like her, she's like, I can totally own that. She did. She was her. She showed up, turned some people off, attracted the right people, and her business is thriving. But it's like,
I
it's
love that.
those adaptions. And so as a leader, the challenge is like, we want to go, here's how I was successful. Go do that. Well, you were successful because you were like you. That's why you were successful. So you've got to figure out how they can take that same authenticity that you had, find what works for them, and go do that using your systems.
Yes, I love that. We always say that we want our moms to find their individualized success. And when we say that, most of the time we mean like number of transactions, because somebody could be a major success in their life by closing 12 deals a year, and that's success to them. And somebody else, maybe they would feel like they had to do 50 or 100. And we're like, no judgment, right? Like everyone can do what they want, and we're excited for you. But the same applies to the way you achieve that success. Some people love cold calling, door knocking, open houses. Some people just want to sit behind the computer and attract with social media, right?
Yeah. And all different approaches. You talk about success. It's funny, like for me, I think of all the success I've achieved in my life, I'm going to define success later, but like of all the things that I've achieved in my life, the thing that I am the most proud of, I've got a 3-year-old little girl and she is my world. When I look at her, I say, who's the best? She goes, me best, daddy. That has filled my heart every day. Like for like a year and a half, whenever I ask her who's the best, she goes, me best, daddy. The other day, I asked her, who loves you best? Her answer, me, daddy. I love me best. And I was like, that is the best answer you could possibly have to that question. Like I teared up a little bit. Like I was like, I want that for everybody. Like that. So for me, like when I look at success, success is being perfectly content and fulfilled where you are while striving to be the best you can be. It's not one or the other. It's not a destination. It's fully embodying where you are, accepting your strengths and weaknesses, and also having that goal and drive to be the best version of yourself constantly. I've created a concept called the cycle of self-evolution. And it's like this journey of self-emergence where you're bringing yourself out, setting your vision based upon what resonates with who you are, being intentional in how you live, and then reflecting on the results and going, is this me or is this not? That spiral is living successfully.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wanted to ask you, kind of shift gears a little bit. Just if you don't mind indulging me. My original plan with you is to have you diagnose my team. If you remember, I don't know if you remember that. And you're like, yeah, it typically costs this much, but anyway. So I wanted to know, what tips do you have for somebody that is like me? Like how can a high D, high I be the best leader that they can be?
So first off, if you're running a team, reach out to me and I will set up a portal for you. It doesn't cost you anything, and run profiles for your organization so that you have everyone's profile. It tells you who they are. That doesn't cost anything. Happy to do that. My disc guy on Instagram, hit me up. Happy to put that together for you. For you, if you're a high D and a high I, and you want to be able to build a team that's successful and really want to be able to create influence, I ran a class yesterday called Unlocking the Secrets of Leadership and Influence. Your job as a leader is simple. 4 things. You have to make your people feel seen, safe, accepted, and protected. If so, they will be empowered to go out and achieve whatever they want to do. You can't make someone feel safe if they don't feel seen. So knowing who they are, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, accepting that who they are. Do you have a pen and paper near you?
I do.
Okay, cool. Write this down. This is fun. And everybody who's listening, if you have a pen and paper, write this down because this is fun. Write down the equation 8 + 8 = 91. This is one of the most valuable lessons I can teach you as a leader. 8 + 8 does equal 91. If you look at that equation, is that correct or is that wrong?
Wrong.
No, it's right. I say it's right, and I guarantee you that equation is right, and you say it's wrong. What do you think about me right now? If I think that equation is correct and you think it's wrong, what do you think about me?
That you got the plus wrong. It should be a
Right.
multiple.
No, because even to multiply it doesn't go to the 91. Eight times eight is 64.
You're right.
Used to
I
be an
don't
engineer.
know.
Flip it around, turn it upside down. 16 equals 8 plus 8. My perspective
Mm.
is 16 equals 8 plus 8. Yours is 8 plus 8 equals 91. It's the same equation, but because we see it differently, you and I have contrasting views, but they're both correct. See, 16 equals 8 plus 8. So it doesn't matter that you and I drastically disagree on the exact same subject. You're right, and I am too. This idea
Right,
that dichotomies have to be in conflict is a stupid concept that we came up with as humans. Day and
right.
night. It can't be day and night. Okay, what about an eclipse? Is it day or is it night during an eclipse? Help me understand.
It's day.
It's day, but what defines night? Is it a time? What time is it night? Or what time does it transition from day to night? Or when does it become? And it's like
Right.
we as humans create these rules and then we hold these rules as truth when there really isn't any dichotomy. We are all just existence. That's all it is. Everything.
Mm. This just got
It's-
deep.
yeah, tell me about it. But like this concept though, it's like everything that exists, like as a kid, I watched my daughter. She's like, chair. I'm like, yeah. And then she looks at the table. She goes, chair. I go, no table. And all of a sudden I'm realizing, like, you define what a thing is by defining what it's not. So we, in our entire lives, create dichotomies. What's the opposite of success?
Failure.
You see, and so many people have that. But a lot of the people that I ask that are successful, when I ask them, what is the difference or what's the opposite of success? They go, growth. I go, what do you mean? They said, well, I've either achieved success or I'm working towards it. Those are the two cycles. I
Hmm.
said, well, what about failure? They go, failure isn't a thing. Failure is just giving up. So you either have failure or you're working. So the opposite of failure is you try it again. Like for them, they've created different dichotomies. So instead of success or failure, what they have is failure or trying. Because if you try, you're not failing. And if you don't try, that is failure. And so that's their dichotomy. And for them, you've either achieved success or you're progressing towards it. So that's their
Yeah.
dichotomy. But
Yeah.
that's that resilience that there's no failure, there's only feedback. That's the mindset that they have. And
Yeah.
so we create these dichotomies. And then in our world, here's the thing is if you have success and failure, where you are ranking yourself on that spectrum. Am I
Mm.
successful or am I a failure? You look at everybody else. Are they a success or a failure? And they're in this spectrum that you created, but then you're running from one and running toward the other.
So we say individualized success, and I have people go through like an exercise of, imagine your life in 5 years and it's amazing, and just like really think about that and describe it in detail and what is that to you. And the reason I do that is because a lot of people I coach want to build mega teams. They want to attract lots of agents, and they think that that's the way they're going to be successful.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, but why? But why? But why? And it really comes back to time with their family, maybe income, the freedoms, right? Income, time, and location freedom. And I'm like, but what if you could accomplish that without the agents? What if you could accomplish that in a simpler manner? Like, you know what I mean? So it's like challenging the normal method of that success.
Right. And like your question is like, how do leaders get to the point that they can lead successful teams? Is they have to honestly see that everyone has that potential to be successful. And then you as a leader, it's not whether or not they can be successful. It's whether or not you can lead them and whether or not it's worth your time to do it. So you bring someone onto your team and it's like they're not successful, they're not following the scripts. No, you're not adaptive enough to get them to follow the scripts. You're not adaptive enough to get them to do it your way. So it's you as a leader. And then it's not that you need to, but perhaps you're not the right leader for them. Maybe
Right.
they need a different leader. And so that's not a failure on your part. That's true recognition of what is your culture and what is your organization. Who do you work well with and what can you lead? As your leadership develops, as you develop the ability to adapt your leadership, who you can bring into your organization grows, it changes. But
That's
initially, I
true.
mean, there's two different versions. You can have one where it's all people who are like you that you lead naturally. So you're this particular type and you lead this particular type naturally, build your team with that type, you win. Here's the other thing, adapt your leadership, broaden, bring more people in, and then bring key leaders in who lead each of the different types and train them to work with their people, because you can work with everybody. That's the other way.
Yeah.
Both of those work. It's the difference
Yeah.
between the what is it, the SEAL team versus the mega team. That's the
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah. And we call it a micro team. So I think it's the same, the SEAL
Yeah,
micros.
micro team.
Yeah. No, that's so good. And and the other, I'm going to reference Gary Keller again. I was with Keller Williams. I'm with EXP now, but so
Yeah.
obviously I don't know. He made an imprint on my life. But he talks about, and I shared the other day about expanding your world to be big enough to keep those that are in your world in it, right?
Yeah.
Which
One of
is
my
really
favorite quotes, it actually came from a movie and I've kind of tweaked it a little bit. So I don't really know what the actual quote is anymore. But you know what the difference is between a tourist and a traveler? A tourist
cool.
goes to another destination to escape their world and experience new places. A traveler goes to expand their world. So a tourist will go over, visit Spain, come back, and they're like, that was a really cool trip. When I was in Spain, they did this, this, this. A traveler goes, I now have concepts of that and I'm bringing it back with me.
Interesting.
My world expands as I travel, as opposed to this is my home and I go visit these other places. It's cool. It's like, no, this is my home is the world. And I'm expanding the map by traveling. And it's the same kind of thing as you understand different personalities. When I say that we are just existence, it's so funny because you talk about being a high D and a high I. But if you make a bad decision and you get bit really hard and you have a couple of things go wrong, it wouldn't take much for you to be a little bit more intentional with how you're making your decisions and moving forward. When something is high pressure, high importance, and you're really nervous about whether or not it's the right thing to do or not, you may actually start to exhibit the low D traits. You go out
Yeah.
to a new group and you're like socializing with everybody, and all of a sudden you're just exhausted and you don't feel like talking to people. You're now exhibiting the more introspective personality style. You don't live there, but you are all of the personality styles. They're all in you in one form or another, and they display in different ways. And the question is have you visited those worlds enough that you can bring them back in and say, yeah, that's not me normally, but I can step into that world because I know what it's like.
Hmm. Two things I wanted to say on that. One, the cloverleaf, and I haven't gone through yours. I need to do that. But they have you take several different assessments, and one of them identifies if you're on the introvert versus extrovert scale. And what was really interesting is, so my whole team is the pretty much S and C. I have one I that's my showing agent, but they're all pretty much on the extrovert side. And I am on the introvert side.
Yep.
And that was so crazy to me and freeing also. Like I felt like, okay, it's okay. I'm not like a freak because I don't like to be around people all the time.
Well, and this is one of the things that I teach all the time, because people say the high I's are extroverts and the low I's are introverts, and that's not true. Introvert extrovert is about how you recharge your batteries. It's based on Myers-Briggs. Myers-Briggs is on internal processing and how you recharge. A high I introvert is someone who can socialize really, really well, outgoing, gregarious, loves talking to people, and they can out people themselves. They go home and they're like, okay, I need to shut the door and be by myself or with my close group of friends. You can also actually have an extroverted low I. Those are the people who will go to the bar, sit in the corner just so they can be around people, but they don't want to talk to people. They don't want to interact. They just want to be around them because they get energy from the people.
Yeah, that's so interesting. When I saw that, I was like, okay, this makes a lot more sense, and why I actually started working from home more whenever I saw that, and I was getting way more done. Because when I come to the office, I want to, talk to my people and be their friend and all the things. The other thing I was going to say is just a little story. I was telling my son that I was going to interview you, and I was telling him about the disc and what those things are, and told him what I was. And he's like, yeah, I'm definitely a DI. And then he's like, but you know what? I'm an S too. And I mean, and I was telling him the C's are kind of be like the scientists and the engineers. And he's like, but, and I like science. I said, you know what? You have a little bit of all of it in you, but it just means, what's more dominant. So anyway,
I
I love
love it. Yeah, so like it's interesting because like I love dispelling a lot of the myths. So like, for instance, the high C, everyone thinks that they're process oriented and they love their processes and that's all they care about. And I hear it all the time. It's like they're sticklers for the rules and they don't like change. And a high C wants quality, predictable outcome. That's all. That's it. They care about the process because the process is how they get quality, predictable outcome. They don't mind change as long as they know what the result's going to be. So if you're like, hey, let's give it a try, which is how the high Ds talk about change, is yeah, let's just give it a try, see if it works. No. We have a plan. We have a plan. It's been successful in 15 other companies. And if it doesn't work for us, we always have mitigations in place ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and implement this starting next week. Don't use the word try with a high C. They don't like it. So just tell them this is going to work. And if it doesn't, we have a plan. So let's go ahead and move forward. And they'll be like, okay. And they won't have an issue with it.
Yeah. That's so good. I think my husband is a high C. And that's what I was telling him, like, this is what I am, Henry, and this is what your dad is. And he was like, I'm more like you, but I'm like dad. So that's good. I'll have to remember. My husband's famous saying is, I could get anyone to try. He hates that word. So I'm glad to hear that. Anyone can try. So I feel like I could talk to you all day. Probably. I know you probably have some, somewhere to go. But this was great. I appreciate, all of the things you've shared. And I know everyone that's listening right now, definitely go check out what he has to say about DISC and you don't know DISC. And what else would you say? Any last final words about why we should adapt this into our lives?
People are the most successful. In the early 2000s, there was a study called the Genius Study, and it showed that the most successful people had two acquired skills: self-awareness, they knew who they were, and authenticity. They created an environment where their success was dependent upon their strengths and their weaknesses were mitigated by people and process. If I had to leave your people with one message, what I would share is this: you are perfect just the way that you are. You are infinitely valuable, powerful, safe, and loved. It's adapted from Dr. Larry Farwell's The Science of Creating Miracles. You are infinitely powerful, valuable, safe, and loved. And as you remember that and you lean into that and then align everything you do with who you truly are, your strengths and your weaknesses, and you mitigate your weaknesses, you focus on your strengths, you will thrive. And the more you know about you, the more you can truly be you, you will flourish in a way you never thought possible.
Wow. That's so good. And as parents, just you made me think of this analogy, and I'm sure a counselor told me this once, but they asked me, when your son was born, how did you feel? How did you feel about him? And I loved him. I love him. And did he have to do anything to earn your love? No. So why do we feel like we have to be something? You know what I mean? Not that we shouldn't be the best versions of ourselves, but it's like that parent's love for their kid. We're not going to stop loving them.
Well, here's the trick that I've learned and I've been working on. I hired a parenting coach, and her name is Sammy Bell, Sure Parenting, best parenting coach in the world. Absolutely amazing. I recommend her to anyone. But one of the things we did was we started making the shift. And what I say now is I'm the adult in charge. And there's a little boy who went through a hell of a childhood and I took over. And so when I'm feeling emotional, I tell myself it's okay. And I give him love, just like I would my daughter. And when he's struggling and he tries something and he fails, I don't call him stupid. I don't tell him he's worthless or God, you fucked that up. Excuse my language. But I'm like, that's not what I do. Instead, I go, dude, you gave it a try. Pick yourself up. Take a breath. It's okay. Rest. You need a little bit of rest. Take care of yourself, dude. Like, I am the parent to that little child that is inside of me that didn't get what he needed. And as adults, like, you talk about that agape, love for no other reason than the sake of being. And it's like, we give that to ourselves. We truly give it to ourselves. That's where that infinitely loved comes from, is not from outside. Infinitely love comes from us.
Yeah.
At that point, you see it in everyone around you.
Yeah. And don't you think that you recognize it more now that you're a parent because you understand it?
Yeah. And it was the funniest thing. I was having a bad day and I sat in the chair and I sighed. I just wasn't in a great space. My daughter walked up and went, what did you just do? She said, Daddy, feel better? I go, yeah. Okay.
And they
she
pick
walked
it
over and
up.
sat down. Like,
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for just sharing everything. I mean, you were so transparent, and I know that this made an impact in our listeners' lives already. So, Alex, we can't wait to hear more from you. We need to have you on again. Yeah, moms, go check out his website, youdon'tknowdisc.com.
Yep, you guys can find me on Instagram at my disc guy. You can find me on YouTube at my disc guy, or youdon'tknowdisc.com. You'll be able to track me down up there. I also, for anyone who's interested, if you go to Behavioral Selling Bootcamp, starting on August 29th, I'm launching a 6-week intensive on tactical approach. How do you adjust your communication based on different behavioral styles, motivational styles, the way people filter? So it's not just scripts, it's how do you change the script based upon who's sitting across from you. Adapt now, one word, adapt now as a code. It'll drop price for anyone who's like the first 50 people that register, but that's out there too. So
awesome. All right.
thank
Thanks,
you so much
Alex.
for this opportunity. I appreciate it. This has been fun and I look forward to being back.
All right. Bye.